everybody, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we are going to be talking about the Peter's Banded Skink. Alright everybody, well I appreciate you clicking on today's video. Again, if you haven't found out by the title or the intro, we are going to be talking about the Peter's Banded Skink. Now, I saw a video a couple years ago, I think it was like 5-6 years ago, from Clint's Reptiles, who actually made a video on this, and this was a while ago, so there's been some new information that's come out about Peter's Banded Skinks. And in today's video, I want to cover what new information we found and learned about these awesome critters, and I want to go over some of the quirks and features and why I think the Peter's Banded Skinks are one of the best lizards to own in captivity. So let's go ahead and get into today's video. Before we get into today's video, again, I want to thank you for clicking on this video. And if you're new to my channel, make sure you drop a like down below, consider subscribing. We are almost at 10,000 subscribers thanks to all of you who've subscribed, making this dream become a reality. I appreciate you clicking on it. Again, drop a comment below. I want to interact with you guys. But let's go ahead and get into today's video all about Peter's Banded Skinks. Alright, so first things first, let's talk about these guys. Now, as my Peter's Banded Skink is tweaking out, I'm going to get him to try and calm down for a minute. What are you doing, buddy? He's not trying to bite me at all. He just wants to go burrow. He just ate not too long ago, so he's probably wanting to go back home and go burrow, because that's what they do. So if you don't know much about Peter's Banded Skinks, and you haven't either watched Clint's video on it or done some research on your own, and you just saw this video, these are what's called a Peter's Banded Skink. Now, they're found in Africa, or northern parts of Africa, really in the savannah area, and he's trying to burrow. I'm going to set him down for a minute because he's tweaking, and we're going to talk more about him. But Peter's Banded Skinks can get about 8 inches long, 6 to 8 inches is the common size, and most of these guys are actually wild caught. So there's been some success in captivity being able to breed these guys, but it's far and few between. It's actually really difficult, and there's not been many successful captive bred Peter's Banded Skinks. So the main thing you're going to have to worry about is obviously a captive bred animal, and all of the things that can happen when you bring a non-captive bred animal into captivity. And that first comes with some quirks, some features, some things you're going to have to learn about and be able to deal with in captivity that you wouldn't necessarily have to deal with if it was a captive bred animal. So you got to keep that in mind if you're interested in getting one of these awesome skinks, because I do believe they still make one of the best lizards or skinks you can own in captivity. Now, they're a little bit bigger than your normal sand or dwelling lizard would be. So there's other kinds of lizards that actually burrow, and these are one of them. And they're one of the bigger species that you can actually get. Now, they're becoming more and more popular in the pet trade. So there's more information that's come out over the years about them. So let's go ahead and get into that. All right, so the first thing that we're going to talk about is care and needs for these guys. Now, it was said in the past that they really only need like a 20-gallon enclosure, not much space, and where that can be true because these guys do burrow for most of the day and they are nocturnal, they do need quite a bit of space. So you're going to need, and my recommendation is a 40-gallon enclosure at minimum. Now, we actually keep 2 of them in the same enclosure, and it was also thought in the past to separate these guys and leave them by themselves. So there's been many people and many forums that I've gone through over the years that have said keep these guys separate. Now, I believe, and there's been many people that have proven this, is that Peter's Banded Skinks actually do well in groups. So we currently have, we don't know if they're male or female, we have not gotten them sexed, but we have 2 Peter's Banded Skinks in captivity in the same enclosure. So let's talk about the enclosure in a little bit more detail on what their care and their needs actually are, because there's a ton of misinformation out there about them as well. Alright, so let's talk a little bit more about care. I mentioned enclosure size. I didn't really mention lighting too much. Now, these guys do need quite a bit of heat. So their basking spot needs to be between 100 and 110 degrees Fahrenheit, which means it needs to be really hot. And I'm not talking a bowl that gets 100 to 110. I'm talking their basking area needs to be 100 to 110. That takes quite a bit of heat. You're going to need at least a 150 to 200 watt bulb, and you're going to need multiple bulbs to be able to heat the ground and the floor space needed to keep these guys at that temperature. Now these guys are found in northern parts of Africa where it gets super, super hot, and it's super treacherous climates they live in, and there's not many that are found in sub-Saharan parts of Africa. They're mainly in the northern part, which is super hot. Now these guys are nocturnal, so let's talk about UVB, because that's something that I've seen on tons of forums that have been talked about, and in my recommendation, any animal needs some UVB, right? If it's in captivity, it gets some sunlight, it's going to need some source of UVB. But these guys are burrowing, so they're mainly nocturnal too, and they're going to come out from the sand because they go and burrow to get cooler during the day. So with that being said, they really don't need a ton of UVB. Now I would still give them some UVB, like a UVB bulb. You don't actually need like a full T5 UVB bar. I'd be more than welcome to if you want to do it. I'm not saying don't provide them UVB, because it is definitely a plus. I mean, they need calcium in their diet, and you know, you need to calcium and dust whatever they eat, and we'll get into that here in just a minute. But in terms of lighting, they don't need a full UVB bar. They definitely need a bulb, but that can be a heat bulb that provides some UVB as well. Now, when it comes to lighting and factors you have to account for, like your substrate and what other variable items that you have in an enclosure that will affect this next piece, we're going to be talking about humidity. Now, these guys are again found in northern parts of Africa, so that being said, it gets really hot, and guess what? It's not very humid. So you need to keep the humidity levels for these guys between 10 and 20%. It doesn't need to be that humid, so we do a mist down every now and then, but it's always a good thing to get a glass enclosure for these guys and have the top as a screen mesh. Again, I'm probably going to drop in a little clip here showing some of the bulbs and the lighting sources that we provide these guys. Again, one of them being a bulb that has some UVB as well as heating elements, and the other is strictly heating. And my chameleon is sitting over my shoulder thinking it's feeding time, but it's turning nighttime as if all of their lights are off. So we are going to go ahead and get into the next part of this video. And the main thing that I have issues with is they share a care guide with a sandfish skink. These are two different animals found in similar climates and similar regions, but they're different animals, and they eat and need different cares. Different cares? Different care guides.
Did you really just say that?
So with that being said, we're going to talk a little bit about what these guys eat, how they behave with you in captivity, and I believe that a Peter's Banded Skink makes a much better animal to handle than a fish skink, or a sandfish skink, whichever you want to call it. Alright, so the main difference with these guys compared to a sandfish skink is the size. They look similar, they actually have banding that's very similar as well, but you're going to find these guys are a lot bigger. They have a torpedo-like body, just like a sandfish skink does, because these guys are going to burrow a ton. Now, you're going to see him start to wiggle and worm. We just fed him, and all he wants to do is go burrow down, because it's still daytime here, and he's not really used to it too much. So, he's a very calm skink. He's never tried to bite me, either one of the ones we have, but their care and their needs are pretty awesome. These guys are very minimal in terms of care. You don't need to do a ton to keep these guys thriving and happy. They get pretty big, so this guy's full grown. He's about 8 inches. I'm going to set him down because all he's doing is squirming, and we're going to talk some more about him. But they have flaps that are on the back of their ears that actually cover it completely. So when they go to burrow, none of the substrate or anything gets in their ear canals and causes them harms. They actually have, like, I call it like armor flaps that go over their ears. Now their heads are very pointy and their eyes are super dark and black, and that actually helps with sunlight. So you'll see that not only are their eyes black, but they actually have black around their eyes as well. Just like football players use, or any kind of other sports players use, they use the little black eyeliner that goes underneath their eyes. These guys have a very similar eyeliner that goes around their eyes, and it helps with sun. So again, these guys have pretty awesome personalities as well. They're not going to try and bite you. Their nails aren't sharp. So if you have younger kids, or if you're a younger kid watching this video, they can be an awesome beginner skink. So I would not recommend this to, your very beginner level person, unless you've done some serious research and know what these guys' care needs are. But in captivity, they can make awesome animals, and you can definitely handle them too. Alright, so let's talk more about their actual enclosure and setup. So I mentioned 40-gallon enclosure as a minimum, and I also mentioned some heating sources. Now you can get all this stuff locally, or you can get it through Amazon and places like that. If you want to check out anything that I've mentioned, links are going to be down in the description. I do get a little bit of kickback, so I'd appreciate it if you go order through my links that I have. But again, these guys, in terms of substrate, need a sand base. They're going to burrow a ton. So you can even get sand from places like Home Depot and Lowe's, which is what we do, and you're going to want to provide them at least 4 to 6 inches of substrate. Now this helps in burrowing. You don't really need this as much with like a sandfish skink because they're not as big of an animal. However, this animal can get up to 8 inches long in captivity, which is quite a big animal. Now, I mentioned and tweaked on it earlier and touched on it earlier, not tweaked on it. I didn't really tweak anything. I touched on it earlier that these guys are mainly wild caught. So mainly what you're going to find is a full-grown adult that you're going to be able to find in captivity. So, with that being said, they have a pretty decent lifespan, but you really have no idea how old these animals are. So keep that in mind, especially when you're feeding and handling, and just overall the care of these guys is going to be a little bit different from the time they're super young to obviously when they're older. The juveniles are going to eat a little bit more than the adults will, but you're going to want to feed this guy a pretty vast diet because they're omnivorous, which means they eat lettuce, which is greens, and they also eat things like dubia roaches, crickets, superworms, mealworms. They eat a pretty vast diet. So you're going to want to give it a pretty vast diet in captivity. And it's always good to mix up what you're feeding these animals. Alright, so I touched on it earlier, but it's going to come into diet. And that has to do with their calcium intake. All reptiles are going to need some sort of calcium intake. Now I've seen tons of people, like again Clint Reptiles, I'm not discrediting this, but Clint definitely knows what he's talking about, and he has super great experience when it comes to animals, but I do not recommend a calcium substrate. You're going to find a lot of times sand actually has calcium in it, and when these guys eat that, it can compact their diet and actually cause them more harm than good. So what we do is we use calcium without D3, and we dust our animals, whatever they're eating, we dust their diet every single time they eat, and that's done without D3. So there's actually a vitamin supplement that's with D3 that's also calcium, and we give that to these animals at least once a month. So that is how you should properly care for these guys, is give them calcium without D3 every single meal, and then calcium with D3 once every month. That's how you should care for these guys when it comes to feeding. Alright, well you've made it till the end. Again, if you have any questions, make sure you drop them in the comments below. If you have any suggestions, again, we're always learning about animals, especially in the reptile and animal hobby. There's always new things that come out with these guys and different care guides and needs that they may need in the future that we don't yet know about. So we are providing and giving our animals the best possible care that we currently are knowledgeable about. That being said, there may be better ways to do something. So if you have any questions, concerns, comments, drop them in the comments. More than happy to go through them and answer questions you guys have as well. But I appreciate you clicking on today's video. Again, if you're a new viewer of the channel, make sure you subscribe, stay tuned, press the like button. We post every Monday and every Friday. But that pretty much concludes the Peter's Banded Skink. And if you're thinking about getting it, let me know. I want to hear about it. I want to see some pictures too of what you guys have setup wise, and maybe learn a little bit more about you guys. So again, I hope to see you in the next one. Peace.